we've already learned and writing it a different way. Okay? So, what we're going to look at first, and what I want you to look at every single time we do a proof, is your given and your proof. So let's look right here at the information given and my given and my proof. Okay? So my given says M is parallel to N. So if I'm looking at this figure with M and N, which one is the transversal? Okay, the line with 3 and 4 on it. So I'm going to go ahead and circle that because remember, we can only work along transversals, and that's something that you want to remember every time we do a proof. Now, it tells me 1 and 4 are congruent. So I'm going to go ahead and in this figure, or these figures, I'm going to circle the angles we're talking about. So 1 and 4. Okay? So there's 2 of them, and then my proof tells me that we want to prove angle 2 is congruent to angle 3. So I'm going to circle 3 and 2 as well. So those are going to be the only 4 angles that I can use. All right? So let's go ahead and figure out the relationships here. What relationship does 4 and 3 have? They're alternate exterior, okay? So I'm going to write AE here in my picture, because remember we're doing a picture proof first. So what do we know about alternate exterior angles? They're congruent. So I'm also going to put congruent here. Okay, and then we're looking at 1 and 2. So 1 and 2, what type of angles are those? They're vertical, and what do we know about vertical angles? They're congruent as well, okay? All right, so that's all I need to do for my picture. Now let's copy down what we did. So what is the very first thing that I always write in my proof? The given. So I'm going to write that M is parallel to N, and angle 1 is it's given. Okay. Second thing, I can do this figure or this figure. Whichever angle, your 2 and 3 are always going to be your angle relationships, and it doesn't matter which one we do. Since alternate exterior comes first, I'm going to do that one first. So what would I write about 3 and 4? Angles 3 and 4. Right. We would write that for the reason, but what would be the statement? What do we know about angles 3 and 4? They're congruent. So we would write angle 3 is congruent to angle 4, and then the reason we know that is what y'all just said. If 2 parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then, and remember, you have to have if and then. Some of you are writing if and then just going on with your statement. It has to be if 2 parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then alternate exterior angles are congruent. Okay? Also, don't forget your angle symbols. Okay? Is 3 congruent to 4? Is the number 3 congruent to 4? No. So when you write it without the angle symbols, that's literally what you're saying. And so that wouldn't be true, and the proof would not be true. Okay? Our third step is to tell about this angle relationship. What is this angle relationship? Okay, angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. Okay, and we know that. Do vertical angles have anything, are they dependent on parallel lines? No, because these lines aren't parallel, they're intersecting. So all we have to do for vertical angles is put that, vertical angle theorem. Okay, and then our last step is our prove, and that is angle 2 is congruent to angle 3. Okay? So we started with 1 is congruent to 4. What did we see that 1 was actually equal to down here? Okay, so 1 and 2 are actually the same. What about 4? What else is that congruent to? 3. So I could actually replace 1 with 2, and I could replace 4 with 3, and it would read angle 2 is congruent to angle 4. And what would that, if we replaced it, what would that be called? Substitution. Okay, so the other class really liked flowchart proofs, okay? Because a flowchart proof, we're doing those same things, except it's a little shorter. So in my first box, what do you think goes in the first box? Okay, the given. So M is parallel to N, and angle 1 is congruent to angle 4. I know that because it's given. So that's what I write in the first box. Now, my second step, it does not matter if I put it in the top or the bottom box. Either one is fine. I always do top, so angle 3 is congruent to angle 4. And in a flowchart proof, I can shorthand, so I'm just going to write the reason is AE. Then my third step would go in this bottom one, so angle 1 is congruent to angle 2, and I'd put the reason that. And then my last would be angle 2 is congruent to angle 3, and that's by substitution, but you can just write sub. All right, are there any questions about how to set up flowchart proofs? All right, let's try another one. Okay, so here, again, the very first thing that I want you to look at is my given and my proof, because that's going to help me solve my proof. So it tells me K is parallel to H. So which line in this figure is the transversal? The one with the numbers on it, okay? The one that is not labeled K or H, because those are parallel, okay? Then we're looking at the angles that are equal. So here we have that 4 is congruent to 10. So I'm going to circle 4, and I'm going to circle 10. Okay, and then it asked me to prove that 5 and 12 are congruent. So I'm also going to circle 5 and 12. Do I need any other angles than the 4 that I'm given? No, I only use what I'm given. Okay, so Trent, what is the relationship between 4 and 5? Alternate interior, and what does that mean about those angles? They're congruent. Very good. Okay, and then what about 10 and 12, Ryan? They're vertical, and what do we know about vertical angles? They're congruent as well. Okay, so that means we're ready to write our proof. So we're going to do 2 columns. We're going to label them statement and reason. Okay, how many steps should this proof have? 4. I'm not gonna write all 4 just yet. What is my very first step, Isabel? Write the given. So K is parallel to H, and angle 4 is congruent to angle 10. Okay, and I know that because it's given. All right, my next step is to tell one of my angle relationships. So, Serena, can you tell me, what do I know about angle 5 and angle 4? They're congruent. So I'm going to write angle 5 is congruent to angle 4. And how do we know that? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If 2 parallel lines are cut by a transversal, And then alternate interior angles, yes, are congruent. Perfect. Okay. Then our third step is to tell the other angle relationship. So what do we know about those vertical angles, Lydia? They are congruent, so we're going to write that. So angle 10 is congruent to angle 12. And how do we know that, Abby? They're vertical. So yes, that for vertical angle theorem, because vertical angles do not depend on parallel lines. So do not write that, because I had a few of you do that. Okay? And then our last step is our proof. Okay? So our proof says angle 5 is congruent to angle 12. Okay? So if 4 and 10 are congruent, what else is 4 equal to? 5. So I could put 5 in place of 4. What else is 10 congruent to? 12. So I could put 12 in place of that. And if you read it, it says angle 5 is congruent to angle 12. So what did we do to make that true? Very good. We did substitution. Okay, so anytime you have 4 angles, it's going to be substitution. Okay? If you can remember that or memorize that, that would be awesome. Now, to do our flowchart proof, we're going to draw our 4 boxes. All right, my arrows are going to go from this first box up to the top box, and from the first box to the bottom box. And then from this top box is going to the last box, and from this bottom box is going to the last box. Okay, so what would I write in my first box, Nick? Perfect. K is parallel to H. Angle 4 is congruent to angle 10, and that's because it's given. Okay? Ellie, what would I put in this top box? Okay, anything else? I'd put AI. Perfect. Okay, and then this bottom box, Alex, what would I put there? Angle 10 is congruent to angle 12, and how do we know that? And then our last box is our conclusion, our proof. So we'd put angle 5 is congruent to angle 12, and we know that because it's substitution. Okay? All right, so our flow chart proof's pretty easy. Okay, it's just building on what we already know. Okay? So on 3, I'm not actually going to make you write a flowchart proof because I think you get it, but I do want to go over the proof since we struggled on the homework. So on number 3, the very first thing that I want to look at is my given, because that's going to help me prove. Okay? So it tells me that P is parallel to W and Q is parallel to R. Okay? So do y'all remember what that means when everything's parallel? Ryan? Very good. Everything counts as a transversal. Everything counts as a parallel line. So we can work along here. We can work along here. We can work along here. And we can work along here, okay? We can work everywhere. What's the only place that we cannot go? The middle. So in the middle, I'm going to go ahead and draw my pond because I know that I cannot hop in that pond with those alligators. Okay, Alex. If I have one like this, but there's 4 angles? There's given 4 angles? No. All right. Now let's go ahead and circle the angles we're working with. So what are the angles we are working with in question 3? 1 and 9. They're given to us. So I'm going to circle 1, and I'm going to circle 9. Okay? So from here, some people that I saw wrote, okay, I know that 1 and 13 are alternate exterior and 9 and 5 are alternate interior. Did we get from 9 to 1 if we do it that way? No, we have to go from 1 or 9 to the other angle. You have to actually get it back there. You can't just say 2 random angle relationships. Okay? So we're looking for one angle that connects both of these. So who wants to tell me the path that they would take, that one angle that they would use? Jack? Okay, so you're going to go 1 to 5. All right, what relationship is that, Jack? Alternate exterior. What do I know about alternate exterior angles? Okay, they are congruent. And then he said he'd go 9 to 5, which are alternate interior. And what do we know about those angles? They're congruent as well. Okay, and so that right there is my picture proof. Now let's write my formal 2-column proof. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my, my 2-column chart. Okay, I'm going to write statement and reason. Okay, what's the very first thing that I write? The given. Do you have a question? Okay. So we have that P is parallel to W and Q is parallel to R. And the reason that is true is because it's given. Then 2 and 3 are going to be my angle relationships. Okay, so Luke, which one would you do first? Okay, you're going to do 1 to 5. So what do we know about 1 and 5? They're congruent. So I would write angle 1 is congruent to angle 5. And the reason is because if 2 parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then alternate exterior angles are congruent. Okay? Then we would tell the other angles. What do I know about angle 9 and angle 5, Matthew?
The alternate interior.
Yes, which means they're what?
Congruent.
They're congruent. So I would write angle 9 is congruent to angle 5. And that's because if 2 parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then alternate interior angles are congruent. Okay, and my last is the prove. So I'm proving that angle 1 is congruent to angle 9. Now, we have that angle 1 is congruent to angle 5, and then we have angle 5 is actually congruent to angle 9. So if all of these are equal, all of them are congruent, all of them are the same, doesn't that mean that congruency would transfer straight from 1 to 9? Yes, okay. So what is that reasoning behind that? What's it called? Transitivity. You could use substitution if you wanted, okay? We could take 1, substitute it in for 5, and 1 would equal 9. So either way, I will take those answers. Yes, Amelia?
When you write the angles on your statement, which angle comes first?
It does not matter which angle comes first. You could do angle 9 is congruent to 5 or angle 5 is congruent to angle 9. It doesn't matter which one. Good question. Okay? All right. On this last one that I'm going to show you right here, I'm going to let you do a shortcut on the 2-column proofs because we're about to start paragraph, and so those are longer. So I want you to not write as much. All right? So let's look at our given for number 4. Our given is that A is parallel to B and C is parallel to D. Okay? So that means all of these have relationships. So we're going to be doing our path around our pond again. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my pond in the middle because I know I can't cross this. Okay, what 2 angles am I looking at, Emma Kate? 1 and 11. Okay, what am I proving, Layla E? What's my proof? Loud. Angle 1 plus angle 11 equals 180. Am I proving anything congruent? No. Okay? So anytime that you have an angle plus another angle equals 180, you're going to have one consecutive angle relationship. Okay? So you can have a congruent, but you also have to have a consecutive. All right? So who would tell me their path from 1 to 11? Yes, Emma Catherine?
I went from 1 to 7 as an alternate exterior, and then 7 to 8.
Okay, so you went 1 to 7 because those are alternate exterior. What does that mean if they're alternate exterior? They're congruent, okay? And then you went from 7 to 11 because they're, okay, and consecutive means they add to equal 180. Okay, so let me show you how to shorten it so you don't have to do as much work. So we're going to do our T-chart. I'm going to write S and R, okay? My first step is still going to be my given, so I'm going to write A is parallel to B, C is parallel to D. That's because it's given, okay? Then my step 2 is telling one of the angle relationships. Does it matter if I do this one or this one first? Okay, it doesn't matter if I do the congruent or the adds to 180 first. We can do either. I like to do the congruent. So I would write angle 1 is congruent to angle 7. And instead of writing the if-then statement, since we're going to start paragraph proofs, we just put AE. Okay? Then my third step is the other angle relationship. So 7 and 11. If they're consecutive, how do I write that? Very good. Angle 7 plus angle 11 equals 180. We don't want to put they're congruent because that's not true. That's not what we know. And so the reason we know this is because they're consecutive. Okay? And the very last thing is my proof. Okay? And so I'm proving that angle 1 plus angle 11 equals 180. Okay, can we transfer, is something being congruent and something adding to 180 the same thing? No. So that cannot be transferred. Okay? It would be substitution because we would take 1 and we would plug it in for 7 because they're the same. So plugging in means substitution. Okay? All right. So, y'all ready for paragraphs? You can do it. All right. So let's look at your other note sheet. The first one is nice because they already have it mostly filled in for you, and so you just have to write a few things in. But the second one we're actually going to write out, okay? So, Alex, this is the one that you asked about, so I'll show you on this one. All right, the first thing that I want to look at is the information that is given to me in the beginning. So A is parallel to B. A and B are these two lines. So that means that this line, which is not parallel, is a transversal. This line is also a transversal. Okay, so since we have two transversals, remember you can only work on one at a time. So we can't go from here to here, here to here, here to here. We can't work around like the other ones. So we're starting with angle 3 is congruent to 13. So we take 3 and circle it, take 13 and circle it. We want to prove angle 7 is congruent to angle 12. So I'm also going to circle 7 and 12. Okay? And so now I'm just looking at those transversals. So, Sophie, what relationship does 3 and 7 have?
Corresponding.
They are corresponding. And so corresponding angles are what? Congruent. Good. And Haley, what about 12 and 13? They're alternate interior, and that means what? They're congruent as well. Okay? All right, so that's all we need to do our proof here. So our first is going to be our given. A is parallel to B, and angle 3 is congruent to angle 13. The reason for that is because it's given. Okay? My second step is one of the angle relationships, so we'll do this one first. Angle 3 is congruent to angle 7. And the reason for that is corresponding. Since we're writing the paragraph, I'm not going to make you write it all out. Then the angle relationship here is alternate interior. So I know that angle 12 is congruent to angle 13. And the reason for that is AI. Okay, and my last step is my proof, and so that's angle 7 is congruent to angle 12. Now, what do we say when there's 4 angles? What's the reason? Substitution, because I know 3 is congruent to 7, so I could take 7 and put it in for 3 up here. And I know that 13 and 12 are congruent, so I could take 12, put it up here in for 13, so that would read angle 7 is congruent to 12. So because I replaced it, or I substituted it, my reason is substitution. Okay? So now let's fill in our paragraph. So it says, we are given A is parallel to B, and that angle 3 is congruent to angle 13. Okay? What we're given, Ryan. Okay? Then it says, we know that, and this is our second step, angle 3 is congruent to angle 7, because when 2 parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then corresponding, and you would write out the whole word. I don't really have room right here, so I'll let you put core right now. Corresponding angles are congruent. We also know that, and this is our third step, we also know that angle 12 is congruent to angle 13, because when 2 parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then alternate interior angles are congruent. We will when we write it ourselves. Okay? And then in conclusion, angle, and this is our proof, angle 7 is congruent to angle 12 because of substitution. Okay, so we didn't change anything. We didn't do a proof any differently. We didn't learn anything new. We're just writing out this proof in complete sentences. Okay, and so this will be done as if you're doing something for English class. So we're not going to put BC for because or things like that. You will write it out. The only thing that changes is you can use your angle symbols. Okay, so let's do the paragraph ourselves, and I will write it with you. So let's look at number 2. The first thing that I want to do is go ahead and prove it in the picture, and then we can move on to the paragraph. So I'm looking, and it tells me that J is parallel to K. So I only have one set of parallel lines, which means I need to circle my transversals. So my transversal is not J or K, so it would have to be this line and this line. Okay, so we can't work all the way around. We don't have a pond. We're looking, it tells us that angle 1 is congruent to 9, so I'm going to circle 1 and 9, and it wants me to prove 12 is congruent to 4. So 12 and 4. Those are the only angles that I need, is what's given up here. So Amelia, tell me what the relationship here is, 1 and 12. They are alternate exterior, which means they're congruent. Good. Okay, Rachel B. What about 9 and 4? Alternate interior, so that means this is congruent. Okay, so that's what we need to solve. So let's, I won't make you do the T-chart. We'll just go ahead and write our proof. Okay? So, in the beginning, what did they give us in the beginning? Okay? So, we were given, were we not? We were given that, and I'll let you do the parallel symbol here. So, J is parallel to K, and angle 1 is congruent to angle 9. Okay, so that's our given. That's our first step. Then our second step is our angle relationship. So what two angles are congruent? Angle 1 and 12. So I know, or we know that angle 1 is congruent to angle 12 because if two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then what type of angles are they? Alternate exterior angles are congruent. Okay. Our third step is the other angle relationship. So we also know that angle 9, yes, Amelia? The alt X, yes, you can do that. We also know that angle 9 is congruent to angle 4 because if two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then alternate interior angles are congruent. Okay, last step. And this is why you don't want your proofs any longer than 4 steps. Okay? So our last step is in conclusion, because isn't that what you write in English? In conclusion, angle 12, is that right? And so far up. Angle 12 is congruent to angle 4? Angle 12 is congruent to angle 4 because of substitution. Okay, now, if one of the reasons was vertical angles, you would write because vertical angles are equal, okay? Or because of vertical angle theorem.